Halloween night had arrived, and the entire ZPD team had gathered at the city's annual haunted house. Nick had been teasing Judy about being easily scared the entire night, but now they were standing at the entrance, the darkened halls of the house looming ahead of them. "Scared carrots?" Nick asked, smirking as usual. Judy rolled her eyes, though her heart was pounding a little faster than usual. "Please, Nick, I'm not scared of some cheesy haunted house." They entered together, side by side. The dim lights flickered as eerie sounds echoed around them. Skeletons rattled from the walls, and ghostly figures swayed in the corners. Judy stayed cool at first, but every now and then her paw would brush Nick's arm, a silent reminder that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely immune to the tension. They made it halfway through without incident, until a life-sized werewolf jumped out from behind a curtain with a blood-curdling howl. Judy let out a startled squeak and instinctively grabbed Nick's arm, pulling herself tight against him. Her heart raced as she realized how close they were. His body was warm, his fur soft under her paws, and suddenly, the haunted house felt a lot less terrifying. Nick glanced down at her, his smirk fading into something softer. "You all right, Carrots?" Judy didn't move, her paws still clutching his arm. "Yeah, just maybe a little startled." Nick's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer. He wasn't teasing anymore. His voice dropped to a gentle murmur. "You know, I'm right here. Nothing's gonna get you while I'm around." Judy's heart fluttered. Not from fear this time, but from something much deeper. She realized then just how much she felt, how safe she felt when she was close to him. Her pulse quickened, not from the haunted house, but from the way he was looking at her, tender, protective, and so much more than just her snarky partner. She swallowed and, with a small smile, pulled herself even closer. "I know." They continued walking through the house, but now Judy didn't let go of his arm. And Nick? He didn't seem to mind at all. In fact, he kept her close until they reached the end. And even after they stepped out into the cold night air, neither of them said a word about letting go. The ZPD Halloween party was in full swing, and Nick and Judy had spent the night surrounded by their colleagues, the air filled with laughter, music, and spooky decorations. Nick had spent most of the evening by Judy's side, his usual sarcastic self, cracking jokes about everyone's costumes and making her laugh until her sides hurt. But now, as the clock crept closer to midnight, something had shifted between them. Maybe it was the way Nick had looked at her tonight, or the way she couldn't stop thinking about how much she wanted to kiss him. The thought had been nagging at her all night. What if tonight was the night? Halloween, after all, was a night for daring, for stepping out of the ordinary. The party began to wind down, and as the last of their colleagues started leaving, Nick and Judy found themselves standing outside the precinct, the cold autumn air swirling around them. Nick leaned against the wall, his pirate costume a little disheveled after hours of dancing and mingling. Judy, in her little witch costume, stood next to him, her heart beating faster with every second that passed. "You know," Nick said casually, his voice low, "I'm pretty sure there's one tradition we haven't crossed off the Halloween list yet." Judy looked up at him, her ears twitching. "Oh? And what tradition is that?" Nick's eyes met hers, and for a moment, the playful glint faded, replaced by something much deeper, a midnight kiss. "Isn't that what they do in the movies? You know, when the clock strikes 12? Her heart leapt into her throat. She couldn't deny it anymore. She wanted that kiss. She wanted it more than she had ever wanted anything. "Nick," she began softly, stepping closer. "Are you saying you've been waiting all night for this?" He gave her that signature smirk, but there was a softness in his eyes that made her knees go weak. "What can I say? Carrots? I'm a sucker for tradition." The city around them seemed to fade away as Judy took one more step forward, closing the gap between them. She could feel her heart hammering in her chest, her paws trembling slightly as they brushed against his. She glanced up at him, her pulse racing, waiting for him to make the move. But Nick, for once, seemed just as nervous as she was. His usual bravado slipped, and for a brief second, he hesitated. "Do you want this?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the gentle breeze. Judy's answer was immediate. She nodded, her eyes never leaving his, more than anything, and that was all it took. Nick leaned down, his breath warm against her fur, and then his lips brushed against hers. The world seemed to still for a moment, everything falling into place as their kiss deepened. It wasn't hurried or forced. It was soft, gentle, perfect. When they finally pulled apart, the clock struck midnight, the faint chime ringing through the cool night air. Judy blinked up at him, her heart still racing. So, is this a new Halloween tradition now? Nick grinned, his eyes twinkling with mischief. I think it should be. Carrots, same time next year? Judy laughed, but she couldn't hide the happiness in her eyes. I think we could start a tradition like that. And as they walked back, side by side, Nick slipped his paw into hers, giving it a gentle squeeze. For once, no words were needed. The night had given them something more than just costumes and candy. It had given them the first step into something real. It was the night before Halloween, and Judy had convinced Nick to carve pumpkins with her in her apartment. Nick, ever the skeptic, wasn't sure why a grown fox and a grown bunny needed to be elbow deep in pumpkin guts, but Judy insisted it was tradition. They sat on the floor, newspapers spread out, knives in hand, pumpkins at the ready. You're telling me this is fun? Nick raised an eyebrow, staring at the slimy orange innards. This looks like a murder scene, Carrots. Judy giggled. Oh, come on, Nick, it's festive. Besides, I bet you'll love it once you get into it. Nick sighed dramatically, but picked up his knife. Fine, but if I accidentally lop off my ear, it's on you. As they started carving, the room filled with the sound of laughter and teasing banter. Judy was carefully etching a classic jack-o'-lantern face, while Nick's pumpkin didn't exactly resemble anything recognizable. What is that supposed to be? Judy asked, trying to stifle a laugh as she looked at Nick's pumpkin, which had more holes than a block of cheese. Nick grinned. It's abstract art, Carrots. You wouldn't understand. But just as Judy was about to make a snarky comeback, she slipped on a stray piece of pumpkin and fell right into Nick's lap. For a moment, neither of them moved. Judy was practically nose to nose with him, her cheeks flushing under his amused gaze. Well, Nick said, his voice soft, this is one way to get closer. Judy quickly scrambled to her feet, flustered. That was an accident. Nick chuckled. Sure it was, Carrots. Sure it was. But the way his tail flicked and the grin that stayed on his face for the rest of the night told her that maybe, just maybe, he didn't mind the accident at all.